and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. And on today's 181st episode of The Thriller Zone, we welcome Eric Rickstad and his book, Lilith. Folks, this is a book that you're going to be reading and thinking about and talking about for weeks to come. That's all I'm going to say. So how about you and I get into The Thriller Zone and meet Eric Rickstad? Well, let's just shoot out of the gate with a big, fat, robust welcome to The Thriller Zone, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This book, Lilith. And I know I apologize for being late to the game, Eric, so please forgive me.
Quite all right.
But your buddy, your good friend Shane Salerno sent me a copy.
Yep.
Holy bananas. I read this thing, I think, in 2 sittings. Easy.
Reaction I wanted. That's the reaction I was going for.
Godly day. I haven't had, I read a lot of books, Eric, and I get all different kinds of reactions. But this one, and we're going to drill down on it, folks. Bear with me. We're going to drill down deep in the allotted amount of time we have. But very seldom do you read a book, especially in the thriller genre, where you go, oh, yeah, I got this. I know where he's going. I know what he's doing. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, that's a little bit different than I anticipated.
Yep.
And then it just keeps going. And you're like, and this is a couple of things I want to drill down on, is how the response has been. But first of all, New York Times bestseller, USA Today, international bestseller. I mean, you clearly know what the heck you're doing. How long you been doing this, Eric?
I've been doing it for quite a while. My first book was published in 2000, so a good long while. Since I was in my late 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So about 20 odd years. That's publishing, writing since I was in 3rd grade.
So,
yeah. It's writing stories, loving to read them, loving to write them.
Yeah. Did you think back at 3rd grade? Were you one of those kids who went, oh yeah, Mom, Dad, pay attention here because this dude knows what he's going to do? Or did you develop into it?
I didn't know that it was going to be what I was going to do as far as publishing, but I knew I would write.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a little later on in college or so where, I submitted some short stories, and like everyone else, we get failure after failure after rejection after rejection. And, but I had a couple hit after a while, a couple magazines that said, all right, we'll take this story. And one day, I sat down to write another short story, and it was 45 pages long, and it was still just one scene. And I came home from the UVM computer lab to my roommate and said, I think this might be a novel. And because I've written 45 pages and I'm still with this woman in her trailer in Vermont, and she hasn't left. So, it's either going to be the world's longest story or a novel. And I didn't tell anyone for quite a while that I was writing a novel, because that's just something I wasn't comfortable telling people. What are you up to? Oh, I'm writing a novel. Yeah, sure you are. Good for you.
Yeah, good on you. I think that's probably a healthy way to look at it, don't you? Because you set yourself up for...
I apologize.
Attention. No, that's probably... Is it a bigger name on the other line?
No, just kind of about fishing.
Hey, that could be a bigger name on the other line. Sorry. What I was getting ready to say is the way we can set ourselves up for a disaster or complications or disappointment by going, I'm working on a novel, and all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, well, check back to me on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Publishing and writing are 2 separate beasts. The writing is the constant that brings the pleasure and the challenges, and then the publishing is its whole other beast, where things go well sometimes and don't go well other times, and you just keep writing.
Yeah. Are you at a place now where you're going, I think I got this now? Or do you still have a little bit of that? Are they going to like this next one?
I think I'm at the place where I feel comfortable with how to write what I want to write. And each book, they're not, I've written a series of 3 books long, the Cane and Crime series, but most of them are standalones, or the majority are. And I tend to like to take a different tact with each, a different voice. Last couple have been first person. One was first person past tense, but this was first person present. And but I feel comfortable that I can write the book I want to write. Whether or not people respond the way I hope they will. So far, so good. Yeah,
you're right for what makes you tick.
Yeah.
I want to know what birthed this creative juice, and what I mean by that is, what is a profession or expertise in your past that helped propel this? You know, there are cops who are great, who write great detectives.
Right.
There are military who write great military thrillers. What in your past propelled you to be able to influence your writing with your professional expertise? That's a very fancy way of saying, what'd you do before you wrote books, boy?
I was a house painter through college. I was a teacher for a while after I got some writing chops down and got my first novel out. I taught at Emerson at their MFA program and some other places. I've worked as a copywriter, but my mom was a big storyteller and she loved noir. She's a huge Hitchcock fan. Richard Widmark was her man.
Yeah.
She had her kids late. So she was born in 30 and I wasn't born until the late 60s. So late for someone of her generation. And so I got immersed in all of that great 40s, 50s noir and into the 60s because of her influence. She had a dark, macabre sense of humor. And she basically raised me and my three sisters since I was about 8. She worked at a hardware store full time, and you go in there and it's nothing but local storytellers. Sure. Everybody's gossiping. Everybody's got a story. And I just sort of absorbed that and absorbed people's reaction to, you had a good storyteller in the hardware store, the place shut down. The paint section, no one got their paint mixed, because so-and-so's telling this great story about, what were the cops doing at that place?
Yeah.
I had a cop that was across the street when I grew up. And he was older than me, but he was a neighbor. And, so I learned a little bit about his career. And then I had a friend who became, surprisingly a criminal. And that really influenced me to write crime fiction, because I knew his backstory and it shocked us all until we learned his real backstory. And then it made sense. Well, only to a point, because he was the first CNN live fugitive chase back in like 87 or 88.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you took my brain down a short path of memory that I absolutely adored. And I can count on one hand and still have enough fingers to bowl on how many times I have run across great, legit hardware stores. And I'm talking about the hardwood floors, the swinging screen door, the bell over the door, ding, 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 somebody's coming in. Some of my very best memories of childhood and later were at those hardware stores, and just going in to order a screw or some nails and just standing around, leaning up, getting yourself a soda out of the machine and just listening to the stories, man.
Yeah. From those influences, they all sort of combined, and I wrote here and there professionally for different companies as a copywriter until, the books really took off. The Silent Girls took off and allowed me to break away.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to step back and discuss that a little bit, because let's see, you got award-winning Canaan Crime series. So we got Silent Girls, Names of Dead Girls, and Lie in Wait. Is that series also continuing?
I haven't written, in my head it is.
Okay, good.
I haven't written one yet. I had a couple standalones that I did and started another part of another shoot, but those are always beckoning, and those characters are sort of ever present and on mind. And so I will get to those eventually to continue their stories, because they're waiting for me, and I know sort of what they're up to, and I know what's going to happen. And I've got to sit down and get them out there and knock them out.
There's the good news and the bad, or there's a good side and a bad side to series versus standalones. maybe it's not even a judgment of good or bad, but I ask writers often, do you prefer standalones to series? The good news about series is you've already built the world, so you're duplicating parts of the world. You're just continuing the life story. Whereas standalones, you get to experience a whole new experience every single time. Do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. I tend to write more standalones, and the Silent Girls, that Canaan crime series, I didn't write it intending it to be a series. I wrote the Silent Girls and ended it on a huge cliffhanger that I was fine with. Just leave it there. You know, I'm going to piss off a lot of readers, and I'm going to make a lot of readers happy. You know, and then it just sort of kept creeping in like this. There's more here, and sort of took it on its own life. I was able to. You could probably read any of them on their own, and you'd be fine to read them as a standalone. But I do like recurring characters too. So they do both have, their pros and cons as far as what they offer you as a writer and the challenges they offer. One of the things that's a challenge with the series for me is, how do I readdress what I've already written for someone just coming in?
Yeah.
How do I, do a synopsis of, what's come in the book before in a succinct way that's not just parroting the first book? How do I let them know this happened if they are coming in late? And so, I read tons of series to figure out how other writers accomplish that,
Yeah, ask yourself, is it good to do a synopsis in the form of maybe a prologue or?
Yeah, and not like it's not, but you have to feed them enough information that has taken place in previous books for them to not be entirely adrift. They have to have some anchor point. The farther along you go, maybe some of that goes away. They become kind of more standalone books that are part of a series in a way,
Before we dive into Lilith, are there elements inside the Canaan crime series that share? And I know, look, Lilith is a one of a kind book. Literally, I don't think I've ever read anything even close to it.
Right.
But are there things in those other books that fuel a similarity or provoke a similar headspace?
I think I write a lot from a place of anger and rage, meaning that when I write about crime, I like to really examine what happens to the victims and how profound it can be, and not just. And I love Agatha Christie. I love all sorts of books, and mysteries. But when I'm writing them, I want it to be more than just, here's a body, let's solve the crime.
Sure.
And part of that probably is because of what happened to my friend and knowing some cops pretty well. And I wanted to have a real emotional impact, so that if someone is a victim of a serious crime, you really feel it. So I think in that way, Lilith and the Canaan crime series have that in common, where hopefully you're with the victim more than, and trying to get justice for them and examining certain things in the system that might not be working as well as they should. So that place of frustration or rage, which, Lilith is to the end.
And speaking of that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Eric's going to give us some of that inside scoop as to how that story came about. Why did it take a decade to get to, and a lot more right after this. Stay with us. And we're back with Eric Rickstad, and the book is, of course, Lilith, and it is a powerful, profound story, a profound commentary on a lot of world today. I want to start out of the gate with, where did I read, Eric? By the way, welcome back.
Thank you.
Where was I reading? I want to say Crime Reads, where the story kind of birthed. And when I read your explaining, which you're going to do for my audience, of where this came from, it literally just kind of pushed me back into my seat, because I felt what you were feeling and the power of what's going on in this story. So without me giving anything away, I want you to be able to say what it is about, and why did it take a decade to create?
Okay, so yeah, it's about a mother who's a teacher, She's a single mother. She has one son who's in second grade or so, and she teaches kindergarten. And she can't get her head around the fact that we have to practice lockdown. So we have to practice for the slaughter of our children. As part of her job is preparing for the potential slaughter of her students and maybe her own son who's at the same school. And it started with me dropping off my daughter at her first kindergarten class, pre-K class in a small Vermont town, and seeing this sign that said, if red and blue lights are flashing, do not enter school. And I thought, what's that about? And then, I'm not naive. It occurred to me, oh, it's about a shooting. If there's someone shooting, these lights are going to go on. And then I went to go inside with her, and we were locked out. We had to look at the CCTV camera and be buzzed in. And I'm thinking, we're in a town of about 2,100 people. We all know each other. The woman buzzing me in knows each other. All the parents know each other. So my writer's brain started thinking, I could see this happening in a place where it's a larger town, but sort of what we're implying too is that we think someone we know is going to do this to us, because no one in Boston is throwing a dart at a school, map and say, if you know where I'll go to kill a bunch of kids today, I'll go here. I'll go to the small town in Vermont, and it just sort of blossomed from there, of this rage that, how did we get here? How did we get to this place? And then they are victims of a school shooting, and her son, is gravely, gravely injured and may or may not live. And she has to suffer more indignity of, these talking heads that come on and use these sort of events as political cachet and a way to profiteer and make heaps and heaps and heaps of money. We all know the personalities, the type of people we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the more I thought of it, the more I needed to write it. And it took 10 years because I didn't know how to write it at first. I wrote it many different ways. I wrote it from many different perspectives. And it's a serious subject matter, because it revolves around a school shooting. I was like, I can't write a book about that. How do I even try, and you mention it and it's like, oh, I don't want to read that or go there. So it took a long time to find the right voice and the right character to enter the story. And then it took a long time to figure out, how to write it and avoid cliches and give the correct amount of empathy and sensitivity to the subject, without exploiting it for my own benefit too. To shine a light on this in my rage that I know a lot of people are feeling. So
it's so funny that you use that. Not funny. It's powerful that you use that word, because now I don't have any small children, but the fact, when I was reading this, that word rage really did it for me, because we have sat and watched the 24-hour news channels spit out story after story this, and we go, and the one phrase that popped into my head, and I'll soften it a little bit for the audience, but how in the hell did we ever get here?
Right, exactly.
That's the question that comes to my mind. And then I thought, the fact that you have to practice in preparation for what you feel is the inevitable is so effed up.
Yes, it is seriously messed up. And so I got to sit with that for a decade writing, and we all feel it as citizens and neighbors and parents or people that are just part of society. Something happens, one of these shootings, and we all get upset, and we get heightened, but we go through the same narrative over and over again, and nothing gets done. And I kept asking myself, how did we get here, and where are we heading? Because it's only getting worse. In the decade that I wrote this, it's gotten exponentially worse, in that every time it happens now, it's just politicized, and it's How can you not agree on the fact that guns play a part of gun shootings?
Yeah.
And that as a responsible society, yes, we have the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner. I own 7 guns. I'm a hunter. I have been most of my life. So I have a understanding of what that is. And most of the people who are for a very strict way of looking at the Second Amendment are just gun fetishists, as far as I'm concerned. They put them before the lives of our children and our citizens and can't get their heads around just simple, basic, practical, reasonable things we can do as a society to help curb it. We're never going to solve anything like this, but we're stuck in this, intractable situation where we don't do anything. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And so where's that leave my kids when they have kids? Certainly not harming everyone isn't the answer.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, slightly tongue-in-cheek, and I don't ever want to appear flippant in this because it's such a serious topic. But I'm going to guess, I'm going on a limb here and think that you probably don't have a rack in your 7 that there's an AR-15 in there. I'm going to guess.
They're all hunting weapons, and it's that's what distinguishes them too, is that there are 2 types of guns, and in doing some research for this book and writing about it a lot, you realize, there's 2 types of guns that are made. One for hunting,
mm-hmm.
and one for killing people.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the 2 types of guns.
Period.
Not made for anything else. That's it. You may use them for other things. You may use that gun made to kill people at the sand pit or at the shooting range, but it was made to kill people.
Yeah.
And each one, as they evolve, is made to kill more people faster, more efficiently, more thoroughly, more quickly. Those are the 2 types of guns. And it's odd that those who use them for hunting can sort of recognize what's happening and what has happened. As a hunter, if you want to hunt as a 16-year-old, say, you have to take a hunter safety course.
Yeah.
It's written and it's hands-on, and you have to get a 90 or above on both the written and the hands-on. And if you don't get to hunt. You don't get to carry that weapon. Why is it all the other weapons that are made for killing humans, you can walk in the store, not know what end it even shoots at, not know how to load it, not know where the safety is, not know what a safety is, buy it and walk out. Just that alone.
Yeah, explain that to me.
Explain that to me.
Yeah.
I'm not at, my age. Oh, I think I've always wanted to drive a motorcycle. I just go into the motorcycle dealership, say I want that one and drive it off the lot, not having any idea where the brakes are, no idea how to ride a motorcycle, but we don't want to infringe on you. So just take the motorcycle and Godspeed.
Yeah.
Go out into traffic with it.
Godspeed or good luck.
These are basic things that these extremists, like in the book, think that somehow that's impeding on their Second Right Amendment to just have basic safety before you leave a store. Do you know how to operate this thing? Do you know how to shoot this thing? Because it can kill you.
Yeah.
And it can kill other people. No, I don't. Okay, well, take it anyway.
Yeah. All right. I'm smiling only because of the ludicrous nature of that.
Right, because it is ludicrous.
It is ludicrous.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, and when I read this statistic somewhere that I was researching about you, and I'm going to go off on the quality of this book here in a second, but I thought about this. And when I heard this statistic, I went, that has to be true, right? This is true, right? A woman has never gone into a school and shot a bunch of kids. It's always a man or a kid, right?
Yeah.
Which is true, right? It's never, as far as I'm seeing, though.
That's correct. If you look at the data, it's correct. It's 100% correct.
So the simple fact that a woman has never taken a gun into school and massacred children is something to notice and to remember, and ask yourself, why, where does the anger or mental sickness or where does it come from that says to a young man, older man, fill in the blank man, that says, oh, no, you should just do this? That's not really a question. It's kind of rhetorical. And the point I really want to make is the fact that, and this is such a fine little line, and I want to ask you how you've been able to maneuver this, because there's a little piece of you find yourself rooting for the woman for all the right reasons, in my personal opinion, just my opinion. But what kind of trail have you had to live on that precarious little slope? Because I know this isn't just we all believe in this. There's,
Yeah. And I haven't had a strong direct response from anybody yet where,
wow.
I've had certain, seen certain, readers leave, reviews that it's too political for me or whatever, but I haven't had that real hard reaction. Maybe, it's only been out there for a little while. That might be to come. But yeah, and this is a book where she decides to bring gun awareness by using gun violence and shatter myths of this country that go back decades. And what you spoke to is the primary one. There's a new narrative that's been born in the last year and a half, it seems, where this is just mental health. This isn't guns, it's mental health. Incorrect. All the data shows that very few of these male shooters have a diagnosable mental illness, severe mental illness that underpins their motive. If it were mental illness of that severity is an equal opportunity disease. Women suffer from those types of diseases just as much as men.
Good point.
They have as easy access to the guns as men. And these are diseases that we sort of use now, or a certain faction that's trying to distract from the gun argument. This is mental health, and people are starting to fall for it somewhat. It's just not true. It's primarily angry men and boys with guns.
Yeah.
And that's a real issue. And we've got to be careful of saying that suddenly it's all just mental illness, because then you explain to me how if women are 50, you're just as likely to suffer the same exact mental illnesses that men do, paranoid delusions, violent schizophrenia, serious diseases that are, you're hearing, I've got to go kill these kids.
Yeah.
And not one school shooter is a female, and 98 point something % of all mass shooters are male. So there's a disconnect there, and there's the fallacy, and she intends to blow up all of these myths about men and violence and all of that.
And mission accomplished. When I hear people go, oh, you made a reference to, yeah, I didn't know if you meant, I don't want to read that book because it's too political, or I don't want to talk about the book because it's too political. Either way, is the politicalness, if that's even a word, is the political nature that you're inferring any less important, the fact of what's actually going on? So I don't want to be political about it. Yeah, but how about if your kids are involved? Can you put your politics aside and just step up with like human nature, common sense in your heart?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this story is. It's about a mother and her son who's wounded. She's wondering at the outset, how would we arrive in this place? And then it happens to her, and the protocols for safety make no sense. And it's really a human emotional story about a woman who she cannot stand this narrative anymore, and worries about where it's headed and what it means if she, and the anger isn't just at, zealot, Second Amendment extremists necessarily. It's at all sorts of factions, the school system and the other systems, and people just saying, "Oh, I'm so angry at this shooting. I'll put up a meme. I'll tell everybody for 3 days how mad I am on Twitter, and then I'll do nothing. I won't even join an organization meant to help end gun violence, like Everytown, or those types of places where you can at least participate at that level, so she becomes very distraught, and perhaps, goes to a place she certainly would have never been if she hadn't been victimized herself. And but it's really a human story about, a woman pushed to extremes.
A woman pushed too far. I remember I do this thing, Eric, on occasion. I don't read anything about a particular book. Sometimes I just love the element of surprise. Matter of fact, of all the books that are over here on the wall, I would say probably more than half of them, I don't do any preliminary research before I start to read it for my guests. This was one of those. So I had no idea going in. I had an image in mind, which I'm going to share in a second, but I went, and I was reading it, and that maybe it's because I'm highly intuitive. I don't know. But when the child is is appearing to play hooky, I'm like, why that foreboding, foreshadowing? I go, why do I feel like something's not going to be good here? Because we all played hooky. Right. We all tried to do those things. I did when he did the whole getting hot and then trying to, fake throwing up. I did that as a kid. We all do that as anything to try to fake mom out, right?
Right.
Except for the fact that I guess he didn't think, how could you have thrown that up, son, if you hadn't actually ever eaten anything that resembled it? Yeah. My point being was that foreboding was powerful. But back to the not knowing anything. So I look at this, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it's Blackstone Publishing, so I know it's going to be a certain kind of quality. And I spend way too much time talking on the show about how much I love Blackstone and the quality of their books. Yeah. But I look at this, I'm like, oh, it's black and white. And I'm like, that's clever. I can't say that I've ever seen a book quite like that. And it wasn't until, I don't know how many chapters in, I went, oh, and I feel kind of stupid admitting the nuance, though. But in a world of black and white, it was just so good. And I'm so glad to see you got Don Winslow, good pal of mine, there on the front, giving a wonderful blurb.
Wonderful of him to do that. Yeah.
A gripping tale of love, power, courage, and morality. Eric Rickstad is at his very best. From the master. Another thing, you did a couple of things that I love, and I've read, I think, pretty much everything Don Winslow's ever read. And I'm not saying you're taking this from him. I'm just saying there's a similarity on white space in a number of places that I really, really love because it's unusual. It's different. It's off the beaten path. It wakens something in your subconscious that makes you look at it differently, and there's more power to more white space. So I applaud you there. I'm sure you had reasoning behind all that.
Yep. I did.
One question I have burning in amongst all that fabulous accolades is why you didn't entitle the chapters as chapters. There's no chapter 7. There's no number 7. It's just, you're up on a new chapter. I'm just curious.
Yeah. And some of them are, some of the chapters are, 3 words. So that was, something as I was writing, I didn't think about. And sometimes I'll do that. And then I'll go back and say, where should the chapters break? And, sometimes I've titled chapters like Old School, King or something,
Love that.
And I love it. Totally appropriate for those novels. And more often than not, I'll number them and this one, there's just a slipperiness of time, I think, that is also informs her mental state once she and her son suffer a school shooting early on in the book. 10 pages in or so that causes her to fall into this timeless fugue state where there is no break. There's no let up for her. If your son or child is shot and gravely wounded and put in the ICU or, heaven forbid, killed, time, as I imagine it, when just even grieving on a much smaller level, a loss of a parent or a close friend or, having to deal with something, an illness that surprises you, it does something to time, and it fractures it, and there's no end.
Yeah.
There's no end to recovering from the loss of a child. There's just no, you don't reach a point where that's over.
Yeah.
So it just made sense to just have it keep going and going and going. Because for her, there's no break. There's no let up. There's no chance to rest. There's no opportunity for her to breathe or be herself ever again. And I wanted the reader to feel that. I really work hard to make readers feel things. And I was like, that was one way to do it, to just, there's no break. You don't get a break as a reader because she doesn't get a break as a character.
That makes so much sense. That makes perfect sense. And it made me think, I've now lost both of my parents. And I remember those first few weeks around both of their losses, is that something happens to your brain where you're not keeping track of anything. And you don't want to, you don't care to, you don't need to. And you'll turn one day and you realize, oh shit, it's been like 4 days. I haven't even shaved or this or that, or haven't even thought about it. So now that you explain it that way, it makes so much sense. And that slipperiness of time, that unending foot on the back of your head going, oh, you've only gotten started. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, for her, it's relentless, both outside stimuli and what she has to do to care for her son, and what she puts herself into believing she needs to do, her own act of violence to raise awareness to gun violence. So.
Wow. As we kind of make our way toward wraps, I want to go back to something that really struck me. And it's so interesting. I was reading a woman commented on one of the book chats of yours. I've followed pretty much all of them now. And she was saying something about she was raised in a very religious household, but she had never learned anything about Lilith, the first wife of Adam, who had fled Eden rather than serve a man. And it made me stop, because I'm like, wait a second. I grew up in a ultra religious home myself. My dad was a preacher. And as I stopped, I don't think I've ever heard of Lilith. And so then when I read that, I'm like, oh my God, we have something in common. And I can't believe I didn't have any idea about that.
She's just sort of crept in my consciousness, along the lines of writing this, along the way. For a long time, there was no presence. She wasn't part of the story at all, which would have been an entirely different story. And it really wasn't until that moment in the gun shop where the mother, whose real name is Elizabeth, realizes this isn't just about guns. It's about men and guns. It's about men and their perceived right to violence. Why are they protecting this Second Amendment right so absolutely, with such vigor? If there's not something there about somehow, this isn't about my right to own a gun. This is about my right to violence as a man, and the myth of violence in this country. And I sort of realized it when she realized it in that scene, that, and that was all just, it just came pouring out, that the list of, going down of, Oklahoma, naming every state, and who was the shooter? A man. Every single time it's a man. And why is that? And she's sort of religious, or has a religious background. Her mother was religious, and she goes through that thread and she realizes she knows about this Lilith, there's two different takes. He either was banished because she wouldn't follow Adam originally in the original Jewish text, or she left on her own. But either way, we're not going to have just some woman who thinks she can do what the hell she wants. Right. She's got to be, there to serve. And Eve is there. The more she thinks about it, she's just there for Adam. She's just his thing. And when she gets in trouble, it's not his fault. She ate the apple. Hey,
yeah.
Don't look at me. I didn't eat the apple. It's her fault. Well, we'll give her pain in childbirth from now on. Then that'll serve her. Those sort of things. And Lilith just became this this metaphor or this other persona, this sort of personality that this mother could sort of wear, and in the rest of the novel to sort of almost shield herself from, the fact that she, the person, really committed this crime, committed this violence herself. So she kind of snuck up on me. She sneaked right up on me.
Well, I don't know. I haven't read all the books in the world. I know that seems kind of crazy. You probably haven't either.
Yeah.
But I walked away from this book at the end, and such a riveting read. And I caught myself thinking, because it's so unusual, it's so original, and you go, imagine being Eric, having created a book just like this, that no one else that I can think of has written, and won't be able to write again this way. When you're the first at something, and I'm assuming this is first, I'm not saying all, for sure. But when you're the first at something and you're at the front of the pack, it's such a awesome place to be. And knowing that you were there first. Anyway, I beat that little point.
Thanks.
I do want to ask as we start to wrap, because I ask all my guests my standard closing question, which is your best writing advice. Now, you've written enough books and you've gotten enough accolades that I know, and you've been at this two decades plus, that you've got to have some pretty decent, tasty insight that my readers and listeners would love to snag.
Yeah, I would say that despite whatever the normal chaos is of your life, the work, of course, is a big one. Whatever your other responsibilities are, family, whatever, to write with a consistency, even if it's an hour a day. I sort of compare it to working out. It's better to do a half hour of cardio or a half hour of light weights or whatever you could do, get it in there each day, take one day off or whatever, than it is to be like, well, I haven't worked out in 7 days, but now I'm going to lift way more than I'm capable of, and it exercises your brain and your imagination, and it fires off your subconscious. I get a lot of great ideas, and I'm not the only one by far. Most writers I know, get a lot of their great ideas when they're not writing, when they're mowing the lawn and stuff. But it's because you've been writing consistently. So I would say find an hour. If you could do more, as much as you can. I was working full time when I wrote The Silent Girls, and I would get up at 4 a.m. and I would write from about 4:30 to 6:37.
Yeah.
And then I would write. My wife would fall asleep at night at 10:30, 11, and I would write from then to about 1. So write regularly, as as consistently as you can, I think helps, rather than trying to fit it. But there are some things that I question that are word count. Screw word count.
Yeah.
I always say, don't count the words, make the words count.
Yeah.
Don't try to hit a certain amount of words a day, 1,500, 2,000. There's a lot of this. Oh, if I can only, it's great if you can. But don't make the number of words you write your goal. I think as we go along, we find out that, man, if we wrote 6 perfect words, 1 perfect sentence that day, that's gold, rather than, 12 pages of just muck. That's not to say that everything you write also contributes to writing better as you go, and to read as widely as you can. That's the other, but good advice. Read everything and anything. Read nonfiction. Read the back of the cereal box. Read. You never know. You never know what's going to. Oh, riboflavin. That I'm sitting with.
One of the most tired things that we hear. Where do your ideas come from? And I'm like, man, if you're just awake, if you're walking across the room or across the park or taking a jog, and you're even just awake, and some ideas aren't coming to you, then maybe you should just think about something else, because
that's true. Because there's something to that particular mind, a creative mind. It doesn't have to be writing. Could be, any other sort of creative pursuit, vocation, that you're sort of open to it, and it's always coming. Like Ray Bradbury said, "Gosh, I hope I die with stories left to tell." I'm paraphrasing. Then run out before.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do, but he was in no. He didn't have to worry.
No.
but there's something to that ideas swell up. They're everywhere. They're constantly everywhere. I will never write all the stories or novels that are floating around in there's just no way, because I'll go out the door to get the mail after, and another one will hit me.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with carving up into little short stories. If you just want to say,
I love short stories. Yeah.
Yeah. I got an itch I want to scratch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And just, get a book and just scribble on the front ideas or shorts or whatever. And because, I know you've done this. I've done this. Writers do this. You scribble out an idea, you stick it in a notebook, you put it away, and you go, if it's any good, it'll come back to me later. And if I go to pick it up and something flowers from there, then I've got this covered. And if not, no harm, no foul, because another one's going to come in about 10 minutes, kind of like a bus down the street,
Yeah, it's true. And they will either stick and, for me, pester me until, okay, I'm writing this one. So it'll leave me alone almost, to see where it goes, to see what becomes of it. You become fascinated with an image or this, what is this trying to tell me? What am I trying to listen to here, to this voice or this image that hits you?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that Lilith kept tapping you on the shoulder and said, I'm still here, Eric, just in case you're wondering. If you're afraid you can't quite get the story, just hang with me, because I'm going to help you out.
Yeah. And that's what happened when I arrived at the right character and the right voice. Then it's me sort of serving them, the voice, and it becomes easier than trying to write several different drafts that just don't work. But I had to write them.
And I think there's a great little lesson inside that nut. There's a kernel in there that basically is encompassing everything you've already said. I had this idea. I hammered on it for a decade. I moved through different kind of voices until it was right. And that's the other part of the write a little something every day, part of your writing advice, and trust yourself and the process and the muse, whatever you want to call it. Just trust that if it's supposed to be, it will arrive and land in the place it should.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Trust the process, which goes back to your earlier question of, do you feel like you sort of have it down? And you never quite feel you have it. Each one's its own challenge, but I trust the process.
Yeah.
I trust that if I, stay after it long enough, that it will start to come to me more than me pursuing it, kind of thing. And then that's when I really hit the stride in the writing part of it. Then I'm just there for it, which is a beautiful thing.
Cruise control, baby. You're gliding down the road. Well, as my wife always asks me, as she's seeing me over in the corner reading in my chaise lounge, she goes, "How'd you like the book?" I said, "I loved it." I said, "I could not read it fast enough." So, folks, I'm going to say, here's a book you're going to have to read before the year's out. Preferably sooner. I'd like you to get it on it right away, because it is just that good. And if you'd like to learn more, go to rickstad.com. This has absolutely been amazing. Your story is one of the most powerful I've read this year. It's so full of so much emotion and truth and consequence and encouragement, and kind of rings a bell to wake the hell up.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's why I wrote it. So I appreciate that.
Well, I applaud you. I applaud you big and strong. So thank you again for your time, man. So good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Eric. What a superb book Lilith is. Now, folks, let's get ready for next week. I know, one week after another, it just doesn't stop. Next week's guest is a gal that has been on my radar for almost 3 years now. Now, she's been on the show twice before. This will make her third visit. And I'm so excited. One of my favorite guests of all time, Meg Gardner, and her new book, Shadow Heart. Oh, yeah, it's coming out very soon. And this book, well, I'm just going to say it's classic Meg Gardner. Do I need to say any more? Folks, before I wrap up today, can I just say thank you for being a part of the Thriller Zone as we approach year number 3. Whew. It's been a great ride, and I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. Now enjoying a new bevy of subscribers. Very excited about that. And if you haven't yet, just go to youtube.com/The Thriller Zone and subscribe. Be sure to hit the reminder bell to get alerts whenever new episodes drop. Of course, you can always drop us an email at thethrillerzone@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time, I'm David Temple, your host. I'll see you for another edition of The Thriller Zone.